We fought to find common ground, and we found it almost everywhere. Democrats, Republicans, independents, each of us Americans.
Welcome back. That was Democrat Connor Lamb on Tuesday night after winning a Pennsylvania congressional district that President Trump won in 2016 by nearly 20 points. Republicans were already nervous about their prospects in the House, and Tuesday's results suggest even more districts than they thought are potentially vulnerable. Now, the Senate picture has always been a cloudier one for Democrats because 10 of them are running for re-election in states that Donald Trump carried. But Lamb's victory has them believing that maybe they can take back the Senate too if their red state Democrats can survive re-election. One of those senators is Sherrod Brown of Ohio, and he joins me now from Cleveland. Senator, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be back, Chuck. Thank you.
I saw on Twitter that your wife said you got a haircut yesterday for this, so I appreciate that.
Carlo's in Garfield Heights. Good man knows. We sat there waiting for an hour and a half.
Okay.
He knows everybody in Garfield Heights, Maple Heights, and the city of Cleveland.
All right.
Just a little bit of a, okay, go ahead.
Fair enough. Senator, let me start.
You brought it up.
Before I get to the political landscape, what should Congress do as an institution in looking into the Andy McCabe firing?
Well, you said something earlier about, as I was listening to the show from the studio in Cleveland, about what members of Congress say publicly and what they say privately. And I mean, what Democrats say privately and publicly about this president and the dysfunction and the immorality is the same thing. But I hear so many Republican senators grumble about his ethics, about his name calling. I was with a CEO the other day who said he has never seen a business leader or a political leader who calls his employees or her employees names. Mm-hmm. And I think at some point Republican enablers in the House and Senate are going to say publicly what they've been saying privately, and that's when things change and we see a president back off this kind of name calling, not telling the truth, sending out these tweets, all that.
Do voters in Ohio care about the Russia investigation right now?
I think that a lot of people do. I think people, what they care about is they see a president who is engaging in that name calling, and people know he doesn't tell the truth about a whole lot of things. And I think people overwhelmingly wonder about President Trump when he calls everybody else names, including people in his own party, right, but he never ever criticizes Putin. So I would guess 70–80% of people in the United States, in Ohio, including Trump voters, really do wonder what exactly it is between Putin and Trump that we don't know details about yet.
You know, it was interesting to watch Connor Lamb's campaign. He didn't run against Trump per se. In fact, would embrace some things policy-wise that the president was pursuing. What's your pitch to the Trump voter in Ohio that says, you know what, I don't like his, I may not be happy with his style, but I think he's delivering?
Well, Connor Lamb's district is right on the southwest edge of Pennsylvania. From the state line to Ohio is only a few miles because it's the northern part of Wheeling in that area in West Virginia, and towns like Steubenville and Bellaire and St. Clairsville and Cadiz and Woodsfield across that part of Ohio. So I know that district in that sense. I know what kinds of people live there. And his race didn't particularly surprise me because Connor Lamb, what did he talk about? He talked about pensions. He talked about health care. In my state alone, 200,000 people are getting opioid treatment right now because they have the Affordable Care Act. Connor Lamb knows that, and he fought for the Affordable Care Act and said, no, I'm going to stand in the way of repealing it. He fought for a trade policy. He wasn't around to vote against NAFTA like I was, but he knows what these the steel enforcement, enforcing steel trade laws mean to his district and in all of my state. He knows what pensions mean. I was in Cleveland yesterday with 200 pensioners that will see 40–50% cuts in their pension, in large part because of what Wall Street did. And it was my idea to set up this joint House-Senate bipartisan pension committee. Yeah. Had our first meeting last week. 60,000 Ohioans could lose 40–50. And what this town doesn't understand, Chuck, is that workers 30–40 years ago sat down at the bargaining table, gave up dollars for the future so that they would gave up dollars today money they'd like for their families, but gave those dollars up so that in the future they would have economic security. That's been taken away from. That's the kinds of thing Connor Lamb talked about. That's the kinds of things I'll be talking about and working on. And that makes all the difference in the world, regardless if you're a Clinton or a Trump voter.
It's interesting, and I wonder how concerned you are about your own credibility being able to fight for these voters. Because here was Hillary Clinton and what she said earlier this week while giving a talk in India. Take a listen.
I won the places that represent 2/3 of America's gross domestic product. So I won the places that are optimistic, diverse, dynamic, moving forward, and his whole campaign, Make America Great Again, was looking backwards.
Senator, I heard you describing those border communities there between Ohio and Pennsylvania. It sounded like Hillary Clinton was talking about those people. What do you say to that?
I say that I'm not going to look back. I don't think voters or citizens in my state particularly care about the 2016 election, whether it was Hillary or Donald Trump.
Well, then answer me this. What does she not get? Why do you think she viewed those voters that way?
So I'm not going to come in your show and analyze what Hillary gets today or not and what she got in 2016, or I'm not going to come and analyze how Donald Trump keeps talking about Hillary Clinton. I think that's all pretty bizarre. That he just keeps reliving. I mean, Chuck, when I won my first election many years ago for state representative, and I remember for like 3 or 4 days, I kept talking about the election, how great I was for winning the election, and then I realized nobody cared, so I stopped doing it. Maybe the press ought to start covering it, maybe Hillary and Trump ought to quit talking about it. I mean, the election is over, and it's time that we move on. We ought to be working on infrastructure and pensions and all the issues that matter in places in Connor Lamb's district and in my state. That's why people voted for him, and that's why people in the end will vote for me and will vote for Democrats that stick to those issues of fighting for consumers and fighting for health care.
Senator Brown, I'm going to leave it there, but I think you're wrong. I think we all are stuck in this time warp where we're going to have to relive the 2016 election
help us get out of it, Chuck. Help us get. You have a pretty loud microphone.
I am half teasing there. I think we all want to get out of the 2016 election anyway. Thank you very much. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.